Hello everyone. We're very fortunate to have a very special guest here with us today, Dr. Ajay Divakaran. He's the technical director at the Vision and Learning Lab at the Center for Vision Technologies, SRI International. SRI International is based out of Princeton. And just before I let Dr. Ajay uh, talk about his work and his journey. I actually was following Dr. Ajay on Twitter, and I was most intrigued by his work and his tweets, and but I couldn't really get a grasp on what exactly his work was about. So that's why I'm here today with Dr. Ajay. So to you, Dr. Ajay. It's a pleasure to have you here today, and thank you for your time also.
Thank you very much, actually, for talking to me and for that kind introduction. I'll do this. I'll first tell you a little bit about SRI,
Yes.
and then I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then proceed with the conversation because it's more interesting when it's a conversation,
Yes, I agree, but
and
it will be.
particularly with a someone with the warmth and curiosity that you bring to every conversation. So,
Thank you.
mm, yes, so moving right along, then what is SRI? So SRI is a private non-profit research institute, which means that we are not affiliated with either the government or any other large or small private entity. We are our own thing. We do contract research for
Mm-hmm.
both government clients and commercial clients.
That's right.
We work with both domestic United States clients as well as non-US or international clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, our mission, so one could ask, so what is this, when you say non-profit research institute, so what is the mission? I think it's important to clarify that. So our mission is to make people's lives safer, healthier, and more productive. So we work with a variety of clients. Some clients are focused on early research. They just want some interesting breakthroughs to be made.
Mm-hmm.
There are other clients who want concrete pieces of technology that they want to deploy. So we
Mm-hmm.
work with a range, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we first develop the technology with that kind of early research client, and then we mature it over time so that it can be used by someone who wants to fit it into an overall offering for some set of customers. And we have various ways of transferring this technology. So the most famous example of SRI's technology actually is Siri on the iPhone. So it was developed first under a series of government-sponsored projects.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, it was actually spun off as a startup
Mm-hmm.
named Siri. And that startup, Siri, was wholly acquired by Apple. And so it became
Okay.
Apple technology. So
Mm-hmm.
that's an example of a famous transfer. If you want to think of something that is more specific to my group,
Yeah.
so in my group, there are two things that I tell people. One thing is that we work with, so our driver drowsiness detection
Mm-hmm.
was incorporated in Toyota's concept car. So that was shown off at the Tokyo Olympics.
Oh,
So
interesting.
this is basically using vision technology and looking at the driver's face and figuring out whether they are beginning to show signs of dozing off.
Mm.
So that
Mm.
goes to the safer part that I was talking about.
Okay.
Another thing you can take a look at is that there is myfitnesspal.com. It has this food scan technology from our spin-off called Passio. So you take a picture of a plate of food and it will tell you what kind of food there is on the plate and in what quantity.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that started with a National Institute of Health project, NIH project. It started from there, and over time, it was then transitioned into this company Passio, which I should point out took it to way beyond whatever we had started out with, right?
Right.
So these are some examples of how, and there you see that has more to do with the health part. right? And
Mm.
you could argue that the Siri is more about productivity because, if you can very quickly get answers to questions, it helps you to be productive, right?
That's right.
So these three things that I just threw out as examples. So that's what we do. So we are in the so-called applied research space. So what does that mean?
Yes.
In applied research, what it means is that you have on one end, you have universities. So in universities, the emphasis is on research excellence in the form of excellent research publications, right?
Okay.
And the universities do not focus on developing systems because that's not their mandate. Their mandate, right, and their mission is to produce good scientific research that can then be taken by someone and converted into an application. You have industry, which, you know, the focus is not on publication, the focus is on producing systems that your customer can put their arms around and make good use of, right?
That's right.
We are in, you can say, some kind of liminal space between those two worlds, right? On
Mm-hmm.
one hand, we also write papers, but our focus is to actually produce prototypes. So we are a prototype shop, not a product
Mm.
shop.
Okay, got it.
We are an applied research shop. We are not a pure research shop, which means that even though we may write papers, writing papers is not our, primary objective, right?
Yes. Yes.
That's a little bit about SRI in general. Now I will tell you a little bit, just a very little bit about
Yeah.
what my group does. And oh, one thing I should quickly point out. So I am in the Princeton office.
Mm-hmm.
Our headquarters is in Menlo Park, California.
Okay.
However, my office and my group is for the most part in Princeton. In these days of remote work, um, it's very rare to find a group that is completely geographically co-located. So we are definitely not all co-located. I have people in the team who work on the West Coast also.
That's right.
So, uh, so SRI has the number of divisions, and I'm in the Information and Computing Sciences division.
Mm-hmm.
So the Center of Vision Technology is one of the four labs within this Information
Okay.
and Computing Sciences.
Mm-hmm.
The Center for Vision Technology is located in Princeton, right across Route 1 from Princeton University. And I lead the Vision and Learning Group. Broadly speaking, you can say we work on the following categories. I have a group that does a lot of work on core machine learning and core application of machine learning to computer vision and other multimodal analytics. I have another group that does the human behavior analytics. So I mentioned to you
That's
the
right.
business.
I would be particularly actually interested in that. So
Yeah,
after
we have
after you
also,
walk me through
yeah.
this, I'd like
So
to.
we have looked at classrooms to
Mm.
see if children are collaborating in the classroom. We have also looked at interactions between children on the autistic spectrum and clinicians to see whether those interactions, to gain insights from those interactions, right? We have worked on that kind of thing. We have also looked at policemen, civilian interactions, and so forth. Now, I have another much, smaller group, and that group pretty much does joint text and image analytics, mostly in the service of social media analytics. So we are interested in figuring out how is
Yeah.
how influence is being exerted uh,
Okay.
in various platforms. So, see, this is different from the live face-to-face setting like a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is happening in a discussion on the internet. So we analyze things like, if there is a video, how far will it go? Who will be all the people who will end up watching this video? We also worry about things like if I want some individual or category of individuals to watch a video, what would be a place to put that video to get them to watch
Mm.
it?
Mm-hmm.
We also look at discussions to figure out whether what the tone of the discussion is. Is it acrimonious? Is it going in a proper direction? What could be ways to get an internet discussion to be more civil and all this, right?
That's,
We
that's right.
work on that kind of thing also. So you can see that the kind of work we do is basically multimodal analytics in the service of the mission that I mentioned to you earlier. You noticed that I covered a little bit of health, covered to some extent productivity and also safety, right? Because if you can analyze social media content, you can then certainly make sure that the social media experience is made safer for the participant. So that's very roughly what we do within my group.
Well, that's surely very fascinating, and obviously, I'm not I do follow technological trends, technology, but obviously your work is very it's technologically intensive work. But what's interesting to me is that you are covering areas, as you said, you're in the field of applied research and you work with prototypes. Hence, there is uh, you know level of application involved. So I'm sure you would be doing small prototypes in these domains that you just mentioned. My particular interest would be, you just mentioned that classroom observation, that experience you had. And so I was wondering, so if you could touch upon a few of these, like the education part and the case study you mentioned about the classroom observation, because I come from education background and I would be most interested to know how new technologies are being used, because traditional way of classroom observation is very much out there, but it would be great for our viewers to know how you went about it. The second area would be a bit of health and social media analytics as well. Though, yeah, so I think these we could touch upon them and perhaps get to know more about, go a little bit into details of these two or three initiatives that you just
Certainly,
mentioned.
certainly. So let's talk about education first, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this was an outgrowth of some work we had done on intercultural communication. So we were emphasizing the non-verbals. So you
Mm.
see,
Okay.
a zero order approach is to just get the transcript and then from the transcript try to make sense of what goes on. Now you are from the education sector.
Mm-hmm.
I should mention that I myself have taught in classrooms ranging from second grade, or what we would call in India second standard mathematics.
Yes, I
Uh,
saw that on your profile that you've been a mathematics
I
teacher.
just
Yeah.
I did that. Yeah, I did that on the side as part of something called the National Service Scheme. I we used to call it NSS. So, I
This was
would,
back in India, not in the United States.
yeah, back
Okay.
in India.
Okay. Okay.
So I went to some village on the outskirts of the city and I was teaching arithmetic basically to
Uh-huh.
grade arithmetic to the children. One of the most enjoyable experiences I've ever had, frankly. So now we all and then I have at the other end I have supervised PhD students. So you can see that I've sort of spanned the only level I have not taught at, I think, is the middle school level.
Mm-hmm.
So so the issue basically is that in any classroom the interaction is much richer than what a simple transcript would convey.
That's
Right.
right.
So the non-verbal part is very important. So in our work, because in this kind of investigative work, you like to restrict the scope. You
Mm-hmm.
restrict the scope so that it is manageable. If you
That's right.
try, it's that whole crawl before you walk sort of approach, that you first try to narrow it down to some simple thing, and then you slowly increase
Mm-hmm.
the difficulty of the problem at hand, right? What we did in our classroom work was that we got a bunch of human observers to come in and annotate videos saying, here the collaboration is happening and here the collaboration is not happening, right? And so, because we had these kinds of labeled videos, we were able to classify. Now, what we did was we went one step ahead and actually developed what we call the layered classification. So, what is this layered classification? So, the layered classification is that instead of just having this black box that says in comes the video and out comes, yay, collaboration or nay, no collaboration.
Exactly, exactly.
Instead of that, we also extract, there is a report of the individual behaviors, right? So and so is smiling, so and so is scowling, so and so is adopting a certain hunched pose, etc. So we are monitoring pose, gaze, facial expressions, right? And also speech tone, right? And so we monitor those things. And so we end up getting what you can say is a granular report
Mm,
of what has gone on in a classroom. Now,
amazing. Mm,
we are still in the middle of trying to get all this to commercialize, but the idea would be that a teacher or someone who is helping the teacher can go through this video. See, the issue is tedium, right? There is the tedium of suppose I have to keep track of an entire classroom at a time. I can monitor only a few students at most,
mm-hmm.
right? So this kind of thing, for one thing, even in the real time setting, helps me to monitor a larger number of students, some kind of seamless manner. I want to throw two things out very quickly. So one thing is we are under no illusion that we can replace the teacher. So that's not how we are approaching the problem.
Okay.
So one other, I want to make that sort of stipulation up front because often these things are misunderstood. Another thing also is that we are extremely sensitive to the privacy aspects of all this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we want to convert it into some sort of a situation in which unwise or dangerous sharing of content about minors happens. We know these are minors,
Yeah.
so we treat the content with appropriate care, right? And so this is not like we are going to just be flippant with what is actually very sensitive information. I just wanted to make that also very clear. The idea is not to spy on anybody.
No, I get it. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
idea is much more to provide. So, what is the issue here? The issue here is, human beings have this recency effect. If I have taught 10 lectures in a row,
Mm-hmm.
or 10 sessions, shall we say, if I have taught 10 sessions in a row, the last session is what I will remember most and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But that may not be the right thing in terms of crafting. I'm trying to find out what might be more effective ways of teaching, right? How could I be a better teacher? Or, how could I change the process itself for that?
Right. Right. Right.
So, so all this is meant to explore this kind of thing. So what I want to point out to you as a sort of by the way, even though it's actually an important point, because of our emphasis on prototypes and
Mm-hmm.
prototypes that will be actually used by human beings, because of this, we end up doing interdisciplinary work. So we
Mm.
work with our education folks on this
Yeah.
because uh, a computer scientist is not qualified to tell you whether collaboration is happening or not.
Mm-hmm.
The computer scientist is also not qualified to prescribe what better teaching practices might be. All those things belong with the domain expert. So, depending on the application we work on, we bring in domain experts. So as a result, you end up working with a variety of people. So I have worked with education people, obviously, whom in my mind, I think of them as applied psychologists, right? They are applying mostly principles from psychology to the very rich and satisfying domain of education, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in the process, I've also worked with social psychologists, I've worked with sociologists, linguists, clinicians,
Then.
right? So it all depends on what it is that you are trying to do. One simple way of thinking about it is that if you are making something that is going to be used by someone, you should immediately try to imagine who all the stakeholders would be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, even society is a stakeholder in all this, right? I mean, if you come up with some way to improve education, society as a whole also is interested.
That's right.
So anyhow, I mean I mean, telling you. So one quick thing before I forget. So I talked about non-verbals. But what has happened now is that the state of the art in natural language processing and understanding has advanced by leaps and bounds.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the past, you can say 2 or 3 years. And so, an exciting challenge is to get a very rich recording, which is basically which captures both the non-verbals and the verbals, right?
Mm.
And you will be pleasantly surprised, I think, to know that dealing with multiple languages also is not as difficult as it used to be. They,
Really? I
yeah,
would
they
be really interested to know more about that.
the ability to at least, I mean, you have some so-called, you can say, highly served languages. For instance, English,
English.
plenty of material in English, right?
Absolutely.
But there are also sort of not so well served languages. So, for example, if it is a dialect that is spoken in some remote area, there may not even be that much of written content. There may not be that much of audio recordings or video recordings,
That's right.
and so then you have to figure out how you would. So the technical term is high resource and low resource. You say, these are low resource languages.
Okay.
At least for high resource languages, uh,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to translate and all that is kind of remarkable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's just by the way. So in short, then the idea is, in short, to track the educational process and to assess it at multiple resolutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I personally have a weakness for what is called formative learning.
That's right.
So, right, as opposed to what I think of as punitive learning, which is what is mostly practiced. I know it's sort of a pejorative term I've used, punitive learning.
What we call in our lingo is summative learning. The assessment happens at the end of the year, but
That's right.
what you're referring to is an ongoing assessment
That's
evaluation of the learning process, teaching and
and,
learning process in the classroom.
and particularly as a student of Hindustani vocal music, I live that, on a daily basis because
Yes.
so I have never been given any kind of summative exam by my teacher,
That's right.
right? But the kind of nurture she has provided me, Mrs. Kumkum Sanyal,
Mm-hmm.
has certainly prepared me well. So there, what happens is that you are constantly, learning and practicing. So you learn a concept, but then you try to master it, and the teacher is there to assess your mastery in a
Mm.
way to figure out how to help you towards better mastery and all
Yeah,
this.
may I just interject? So that thank you for this very in-depth, you know, uh, explanation on this particular study or whatever prototype on classroom observations. And I think you've explained, you brought in a lot of new aspects to this whole notion of classroom dynamics. But obviously, are heavily reliant, and as you mentioned, these are high resource languages that you worked on, but you heavily reliant on technology. And considering, I'm assuming it's a school in the USA, I'm assuming it was a part of your research, applied research project. So my question to you is that what impact did you see in real terms, or was this particular data that you got out of this intervention using? I'm sure I don't know what technology you used. I want to ask you about that also. So, did you see any impact, or was your client, if there was a client involved, did they give you interesting feedback that yes, this is great and we'd like to scale this up? Because I'm sure it's something which is very new to the school education assessment model.
Yeah.
It's very different from the traditional model. So also tell us a little bit about the technological aspect. What kind of technological tools you used, and what was the impact? And if it was for, again, repeating myself, for a client, what was their feedback?
So we did, this was more like we were developing. So this was one of our, we're working with the National Science Foundation and
Mm-hmm.
also internal research, so which means that our client, if you can call the NSF a client, was
Mm-hmm.
more interested in our producing breakthroughs. And
Right.
we have certainly, I think, succeeded in illuminating the subject. We have shown that certainly it can be done, and also we have surfaced certain sort of productive behaviors. We have found, for example, that if you identify roles like leader, follower, etc., we find that the most productive collaboration happens where people, exchange these roles and they are not fixed in just one role. Those kinds of rich interactions. Now, you could always say that is obvious, but the point is that that's all folk wisdom, and our work serves to anchor folk wisdom to what you actually see. We have not had a chance to deploy at scale in a classroom and all that, but I can't say much more about that right now. We are still, in talks with potential clients to see what kind of uptake there would be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My assumption is that based on whatever we have seen so far, definitely there would be an impact on the classroom because we have been able to surface what productive behaviors are and what not so productive behaviors are and so forth. So at least we have a concrete basis for feedback. So that's
Yeah.
one. Now you are asking what kind of technology. So it turns out again, thanks to all the breakthroughs in technology, you see the actual capture has become quite inexpensive now. So we
Okay.
did not use some kind of super duper camera. We were just using basically a webcam, and we were able to. Now it all depends on what you are trying to do. If you have the resources, you could try to use an ensemble of webcams, or you could try to use a camera with a wider view and all that. But these days, cameras for these purposes have come down in price. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that the barrier to adoption is not particularly high at this point. That
Okay.
that's in my
So,
that's in my humble
barrier
opinion.
in terms of costs and
Yeah.
access to technology, that's what you're
Yeah,
implying?
because the point is that our calculation all happens offline. So suppose,
Okay.
so which means that we are not requiring the classroom to have the heavy computational capabilities that you might require to process the video.
Okay.
That is something that can be sent off on the cloud, right?
Right. Right.
To
Right.
somewhere else, and then all the processing can happen over there. So
Mm-hmm.
which means that the actual paraphernalia you need at the classroom could be quite lightweight. They need.
Okay. Okay. But again, as you said, we require domain experts. You work with educators or evaluators, and then you are the technical team. So for instance, I'm representing a school and I request you to do this in one of the classrooms for, for the growth of or for the lack, no, rather to upgrade the quality of the teaching learning process in the classroom. So but video, audio, and text analytics would be done by the domain experts at your end. So again, how simple it is that in terms of collaborating with other organizations or institutions, especially in the global south, countries like India and Pakistan. Again, I'm talking about costs. The reason I'm talking about costs is that we will need those experts who can analyze the data very granularly, as you said, and give a very comprehensive and a very detailed, in depth feedback to the client. So, do you think that model is viable now? It can be done in countries like India and Pakistan?
So what I would say is for our kind of organization, doing it in small pilots is certainly feasible.
Mm-hmm.
Doing it at scale is kind of not part of our core mandate because, we
Mm-hmm.
such
Yes.
institute. However, we could imagine partnering. So if there
Okay.
is some local entity that is willing to partner,
Yeah.
then we could partner with that kind of entity and then have that entity do the scaling part. And we could provide the core expertise and over time also. So we have those mechanisms transferring
Okay.
expertise also.
Okay. So thank you. It's a very simple response you gave, and very accurate to the point. But again, then sorry, I'm a little stuck with education still. I know we want to cover a couple of other things. That the cognitive and the psychological aspects, again, when you talk about that and nonverbal clues, are you all putting that in the domain of the educator, or your technical team? Or, or will your technical team will also have some idea of picking up those nonverbal cues and interpreting them as they need to be interpreted?
So whenever computer scientists work with this kind of problem, there are two aspects.
Mm-hmm.
So one aspect is what you can observe,
Yeah,
then the other aspect is how do you interpret it, right?
that's right.
Right. So which means someone has to come in and provide you with some semantics, or to use educational language, provide a rubric for what you should be looking for.
That's right.
We are not in the, we are underqualified for constructing those rubrics. The rubrics have to be constructed by someone who is a specialist in education,
Mm-hmm.
right? But once they have constructed that, then we work with them in collaboration with them to figure out what kinds of data to collect that would be the right examples
Hmm.
of whatever rubric that I'm describing. Once all that is in place, then that's where the technology comes in. The technology takes the rubrics, it takes the data, and constructs a pipeline that will take the observed phenomena and produce an interpretation that it has learned from the domain expert.
Okay, thank you. That explains it well. So yeah, so that's very interesting, and I think through this platform, it's okay if I share this with other organizations, people
Oh,
in
absolutely.
Pakistan,
Yeah, absolutely.
and any entities who's willing to partner with SRI on this particular aspect of education. So you will be open to that.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes,
as a prototype, you should
yes.
clarify. You also mentioned autism. So was that a separate study or a separate intervention on autism, or was it a part of this?
No, no. So there, the point is we have been collaborating with the child psychiatry department at Stanford University. So we,
Okay.
the clinicians there,
Mm.
and uh, there you see our whole orientation is very different because there, what they have done is they have told us what behaviors to look for. And so we have their room all instrumented, right? It's a different setting from a classroom, obviously.
Got it.
So
Yes,
we have it instrumented in a 360 manner. We
that's
have
right. So
captured.
okay, so that is something you're doing currently with Stanford University,
That's right.
a study
That
on autism.
so there what so I'll tell you very roughly. I mean,
Yeah.
with apologies to my Stanford colleagues, I'm going to, essay a description of their work. So they are, this, special breed where they are both researchers and clinicians. So they
Mm, okay.
take care
Yes.
of patients, but then they are also actively doing research, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they have, so they have their own approach to therapy where what they do is they take these children
Mm,
who are at varying levels of on the spectrum, right?
that's right.
Autistic spectrum, and they try to equip them with the communication skills. So the key is to pick up these children early and to give them a lot of communication skills so that they can, you know, as neurodivergent individuals, they still are able to communicate with the world in general, right? The world is dominated by neurotypicals. You want the neurodivergent to blend harmoniously. So
Hmm.
that's the purpose of what they are doing. So given that that is the aim of that therapy, if you can track certain behaviors like are the smiles being reciprocated, are the uh, you know, is the gaze, following what the teacher is, what the clinician,
Yeah.
as per the clinician's directions and so forth. So that's what we are doing over there. So I've given you some kind of very hasty
Yes,
description.
no, no, thank you. I think that's very helpful. And it's interesting that your model of collaboration also, I was just focusing on that. That's very interesting. So, so moving on to, before I talk about the technology as such, could you just also briefly touch on your work with the health sector, which you mentioned earlier. So just a little bit on that as well. That what are the potential applications, and where can there be more impact, and what aspect of healthcare?
So on the healthcare side, actually, um, I personally have until now tried to stay away from diagnostics. I mean, diagnostics is the most popular visual application where people will say we will automatically analyze X-rays, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of thing raises a lot of hackles,
Hmm.
uh, because people say, what are you trying to replace doctors?
Hmm. Hmm.
Am I placing my life in the hands of this disembodied piece of software? Blah, blah. I don't want to get involved in any of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But the food work I mentioned to you was part of this very, very extensive study commissioned by the National Institute of Health, which
Mm-hmm.
was called the Genetics and Environment Initiative,
Okay.
right? So I used to go to those meetings, and it was used to be a jaw-dropping experience. I mean, at one extreme, there would be people describing, now I won't name those kinds of communities because people will, but
Hmm.
there are some communities that are highly endogamous. They
Hmm.
only themselves,
Hmm.
and they don't have much communication with other communities. Those kinds of communities represent a chance to track certain kinds of genes and find out uh,
Mm-hmm.
what the influence. So there were some studies that were like that. There were exercise science people in that initiative trying
Mm-hmm.
to figure
Hmm.
out what is the role of exercise in general well-being.
Okay.
We were in the dietary part. So
Okay. So more
if
like
you
the
can,
health and wellness part.
so if you can take a picture, so just take a picture of a plate of food,
Hmm.
recognize the type of food and the quantity.
Hmm.
So that's where we were coming
Okay.
from.
Okay.
Over there, and we developed this. So that's one part.
Right.
Now, lately,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because my most recent research has been about looking into these things called large language models. So you would have heard all the,
Yes, of
cited
course.
chatter around Chat GPT and so.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So my thinking, interestingly, so it
Mm-hmm.
was a segue from education. So my thinking has been, do these things construct their answers in some sort of a manner that indicates comprehension, right?
Mm-hmm.
Indicates understanding. You ask a child, why they did something a certain way, and they'll give you some kind of explanation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it doesn't matter even if the explanation is wrong, but that means they have a sort of a compositional view of whatever it is that they are doing. So these large language models, they've appeared on the scene, and now, as usual, we have the entire range, right? From complete skeptics who say that these things are just
Yeah, exactly.
right. They say these are just stochastic parrots, and, with both the stochastic and the parrot used in the most pejorative sense possible, right? And then you have at the other end people who are promising you that AGI is going to happen, by dinner time today. Right? I mean, so you have a very big spectrum of people. I have kept myself open. I don't want to get into any kind of religious war over this kind of thing. Instead, I have been more curious to know whether these things either have an underlying compositional framework or can be persuaded to have a compositional framework, right?
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, I hark back to the same education-based approach where, because this is what educators do. Educators will communicate with their students and try to figure out, is this student just emitting word salad that they heard here and there, right?
Mm.
Or do they have a concrete thought process behind whatever they just said?
Yes.
Right. So that's the kind of thing that I've been trying to look at, and we have been fortunate now, some of our work has got published.
Mm.
And so that was the talk I gave at in Delhi. It covered this kind of material. So which means that you could use this to help clinicians also. So we are currently looking at how you could use these to sort of supplement. So here is the big issue that all clinicians face.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Regardless of which country they are in, they all say the same thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it makes very simple kind of intuitive sense also. Their time is expensive, right? They have only 24 hours. And but the trouble is that each patient presents a pretty rich situation, right? Every patient is like, just like all snowflakes are unique. So every patient presents a unique set of challenges
Absolutely.
for whatever treatment you are giving them.
Mm.
But, so a doctor does not have the time to devote that kind of attention to every patient. It's just physically impossible, right?
Yeah.
So, what are ways in which a doctor could be given more context or the therapy itself could be expanded?
Mm-hmm.
So, let me go back to the classroom example, right? I mean,
Mm.
teachers are happiest with students who understand the fact that most of the learning takes place outside the classroom, not in the classroom. So
That's right.
what they do is, so the classroom is there only for you to get started.
Mm-hmm.
But all the consolidation of the understanding all happens outside the classroom when you practice
True.
whatever you have learned in the classroom, right?
Mm.
So these clinicians have a similar situation where, if you also are careful about the way, so you might have heard, for example, that, doctors are very frustrated that patients don't follow directions for medication
Mm-hmm.
as they should.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the doctor is very clear about what the regimen is, the patient, because of various, personal difficulties, for example, they are suffering from some cognitive deficits, they may
Yeah.
not remember, etc. So what these kinds of technologies do is they give you the opportunity to
Mm.
basically supplement whatever the medical care provider is providing with both information and action, right? So on the
Right.
information
Right.
side, if ChatGPT actually worked as advertised, what you could do is you could ask a whole bunch of questions ahead of time, and you
Mm.
could go to the doctor, and the doctor, can zero into what is happening with you very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Mm-hmm.
now you find, right, you go to the doctor's office, often you are looked at by another practitioner who kind of quickly, gets your vitals and so on and so forth. The purpose is the same thing, so that the doctor is very well positioned with some context, correct?
That's right.
So there is, so in short, if you can provide more context to the clinician and you can help the administration of the therapy in some manner,
Mm-hmm.
uh, outside the clinic, as it were,
Right.
then you could improve the efficacy. Anyway, I'll stop here. I've already gone on for too long
No,
on
no,
this.
no. So just to wrap that up, so again, more or less, what you're doing in health is also trying to capture that 360-degree picture where the gaps that a diagnostician or a doctor may incur, may have those gaps in their understanding of the patient's problem. Again, you're focusing on the behavioral aspect of the patient and capturing those um, very subtle data that a professional doctor or physician or whoever in any, whether it's a in any part of medicine, will be that becomes like it kind of piggybacks that
That's
diagnosis and treatment as well. Does it also help the treatment then?
Yes, it would help with treatment. So all this I'm saying is ongoing. I'm not saying we have already done all
No, no,
this,
I understand, I understand.
but we have very clear thoughts. So on the treatment,
Okay,
I said, let's take a very simple example.
right, yeah,
A simple example is, an actual treatment may consist of a very complex combination of various medications that
that's
have to be
right,
taken at certain times.
yeah,
If you are already very ill, how can you be expected to hold this all in your head, right?
that's right, that's right.
So typically what happens is, you have a societal structure. So some loved one who is in a better cognitive state manages all this for you, right? And they are playing that kind of role. Now, if you could help the loved one also in some
Mm-hmm.
manner where they are able to do all this with less effort, right? That
Mm-hmm.
goes back to making, safer, healthier, more productive. You see that these things all often overlap with each other. Yeah. So
Right.
so that's the basic idea that even for treatment, if you have to go for a walk, you should not forget to go for a walk. Or if you couldn't go for a walk, it was raining, you couldn't go for a walk. You should have some, is there some kind of nice substitute activity? Or just the knowledge that,
Mm.
maybe one day if you don't go for a walk, the heavens will not fall.
Right. Well,
Even
it's
that is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but it's fascinating because I think this, it seems, as you said, it's a work in progress. And, but it seems it has a lot of potential in helping doctors, medical organizations, and patients as well. So that's super interesting. So Dr. J, it seems your work is so heavily reliant on deep learning, LLMs, etc. So where do you think we are today? Because again, as you mentioned yourself, there's a lot of, you find a wide spectrum of people with their own perceptions about it. Some are skeptics, some are totally for it. So, what is your take on the future trends with these technologies and how it can improve human society and societal progress? Because we've also seen a lot of destruction coming out of technology, historically speaking. And so, yeah, it is a very powerful tool at the end of the day.
I understand, and if it falls into the wrong hands and it is misused. So actually, it's interesting. You should point that out. So social media is a very good example of that, right?
Okay,
So in social media, your ability to reach an audience is unprecedented, right? Before we had social
absolutely.
media, the ability to reach an audience was limited to big Hollywood and Bollywood producers, radio broadcasting, TV broadcasting stations, right?
Yeah,
And now, you and I, general citizens can get on social media and, put out a message expressing an opinion on something or the other, and it's out there. I mean, whether people pay attention to it or not, at least it is out there,
that's
right?
right.
So that is unprecedented at the scale at which, and we have seen how people have sort of used and misused these kinds of things, right? So we have actually worked on that. We were looking at, for example, uh, dubious kinds of people trying to recruit and entice minors, right? They
Mm.
could be either from extremist organizations or they could be outright predators, actually, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Maybe both of them are the same thing. I don't know. I don't want to get into those semantics.
Yeah.
But the point is, you're preying on the vulnerable and making them do things and all that. So we have worked on, analyzing content to figure out, who is trying to influence whom and all that. It is ongoing work, but I think technology is helping you track those kinds of things, right? So that is one. So what I'm saying is that technology can be harnessed for good also. Now let me tackle a couple of other things you brought up. One was, where are we? So what you are asking me to tell you is that, so is AGI not coming at dinner time, but maybe by the weekend?
Okay.
Right? That's the. I mean,
That's one way of saying it. Yeah.
I mean, just to sort of,
And
I know
how
I'm.
prepared are we for the
Yeah,
guests?
I'm being very flippant when I say that. So
Yeah.
let me tell you this. I don't want to quibble over when it will come, how it will come. First of all, the whole notion of AGI itself is preposterous. I'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you why.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is no consensus on what intelligence even means. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cognitive psychologists have a different view on what intelligence means. People in the classroom have a completely different definition of what intelligence means. General intelligence is a hotly disputed topic. People say that, look, transfer is a myth. If you are very good at math, there is no evidence that that causes you to also be good at music. It's all just some kind of folk tale, right? It's a fairy tale. So there is all this controversy. So given all this controversy, to claim that you are doing artificial general intelligence, I feel is a sort of a preposterous claim. So I
Mm-hmm.
refuse to engage with the claim at face value. However, uh, you know, just like they say that in every war there are honest people on all sides
That's
of the
right.
war. The same way, there are honest people in this kind of debate as well. So let me
Yeah.
not try to mock them. I got one kind of answer, which at least to some extent I could work with that kind of answer. They said that in our view, AGI, artificial general intelligence, is not, some Einstein-like figure who has Einstein-like abilities, but at least it is as good a lawyer as the best lawyer, or as good a doctor as the best doctor, and all this. Okay, that gives me something. I'm still viewing it with a lot
Oh,
of.
you people say that AGI
Yeah,
can be as good as
people
a
are,
lawyer
yeah,
and a
people are,
doctor.
yeah,
I know about the chess players, but
no,
I
no,
didn't
no,
know that
no,
that
there are people trying to make that claim that we will get there,
okay,
where
okay.
the
That's right.
artificial
Yeah,
doctor
we'll get there. Okay, that's right.
artificial doctor will be at least as good as a real doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And I should point out some interesting things here. I mean, one thing is, you see, these things have, so there is this notion of working memory, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you as an educator know what that is, but for the audience, let's just try to explain a little bit what working memory means. So this is the illustration I like, okay? So suppose you give me 100 question multiple choice test. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What you do is you pause the test when I'm at question 85 and you ask me what was question 13.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'll not be able to tell you.
That's right.
Right? I just can't tell you, even though interestingly, I might have answered question 13 correctly,
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
but I can't tell you.
Mm.
So now these things have freakish working memory, right? They have working memory that is far in excess of anything that human beings can wrap their minds around. So as a result, they can often come up with answers because of that kind of working memory, right? So we ran these tests that uncovered biases in multiple choice. We asked it to take the exam without showing it the questions. We showed only the answers and said pick the right answer. It got 80%
Wow.
because there is so much bias in the way those answers have been structured.
Mm.
Invariably, you can just hack, and even though you're not understood, you can just hack and say that,
Mm,
Mostly, I think this is the answer because this thing is able to make all kinds of correlations. So, what I'm saying is, first of all, the kinds of capabilities that these things are bringing are qualitatively different from what human beings do. So, we should be very careful before we anthropomorphize any of this. We have to
mm,
step very well. That would be my suggestion to everybody. That just be careful because there are lots of capabilities these things have that are superhuman. But at the same time, if you ask me, and this is something that what makes us human very often is that we can walk into a situation we've never seen before and we somehow figure out a way to deal with it.
that's right.
And arguably, that is the special thing about us.
Yes, yes.
It's not clear that these things know how to do that. Now, coming back to, so why did I bring this up? So, what does this imply? This implies that, and I always, bring up this one example that has a lot of richness to it. So, the mathematician Terence Tao uses Chat GPT in his mathematical work. So, you would say, wait a minute, this is one of the greatest living mathematicians.
Mm-hmm.
Why is he using Chat GPT? What gives?
Mm-hmm.
So his answer is the following. He says, Chat GPT makes a lot of mistakes when I ask it to construct a proof,
Okay.
but it takes me less time to correct those mistakes than to go through the grind of writing all of it myself.
Mm, mm,
So what does that tell you? So what that tells you is that any task that can be much sped up through some small amount of human intervention,
mm.
right? Those kinds of tasks will happen in collaboration with these kinds of models. So
So,
there are lots.
yeah.
So there are lots
Mm.
of offices that already use these kinds of
Yeah,
things, right? So
yeah.
people,
So,
while
yeah. No, I kind of grasp what you're saying. In fact, it has certainly clarified a few um, question marks in my own mind, and I hope people who would be watching this also it's some food for thought. So it seems that yes, we're not sure whether this will be one day sentient as a human being, but certainly it's working as an assistant right now. And the other thing is that we're really looking at, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is very my own very basic pedestrian way of putting it. Is it speed processing versus nuanced complexity or analysis? Like speed is, we're looking at these models as where they bring the speed and or I'm not sure the accuracy, as you just mentioned, given this example, the mathematicians, how they use it for their research. So they're doing it for their convenience because it would take far longer time for them to go through detecting the mistakes. So is it as simple as that, that it's really speed versus complexity or analysis? Can you help me frame this in a better way? My
oh,
question, if it is valid
yeah,
or not. One, I don't know if I'm asking you, is it a valid statement or not? So, well, what are your
no,
views?
no, 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 no. The point is every question has some value to it because my belief is that every question is informed by some underlying worldview. So one has to at least try to poke at it, and arguably that is another very quintessentially human characteristic.
Hmm.
We talk to each other. We don't always only go by whatever is happening at the surface, right? If you ask me, have you had a cup of tea today?
Mm-hmm.
You might mean to offer me a cup of tea. You may not mean just the objective fact of whether I've had a cup of tea or not. You see,
That's
so we
right.
communicate with each other in a very rich
Yes,
manner,
yes,
right?
yes, the data is far richer.
And the
Yeah.
question is, so actually, let me address that right away. So the question is, do these kinds of models communicate with the same level of richness? The answer is no. They,
Hmm.
I mean, they'll go. We have worked with these things where, we applied it to something called motivational interviewing. Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah, motivational interviewing is this clinical technique where, the motivation to change certain toxic behavior patterns comes from inside you. So you
Fascinating.
yourself think. So this is mostly with the addiction, uh,
Oh, wow.
mostly with addiction, that if you fully grasp, what the consequences of your behaviors are, that gives you a strong motivation to seek out ways to then stop those patterns, right?
Mm,
So it's a very valuable, very, very
mm,
valuable set of tools, right?
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
obviously, and by the way, let me hasten to say it's not some silver bullet, but it's a very powerful, in the right
Yeah.
hands, it can do a lot. So what we were trying to do was, can we create a simple thing that tries motivational interviewing, right? That tries to, so you start asking questions, and the idea basically there is that you have the person, the subject come to their solution on their own. You are there only to facilitate.
Mm.
So our experience was that in one particular, the damn thing just gets stuck, and then after that, it just keeps spewing the same statement out again and again and again. You do that, and people will immediately disengage. Even with a
Uh,
human being, if
yeah.
you are talking to me,
Yeah.
and if I keep saying the same thing again and again,
Yep.
you will say, even if it is not, even if it is still idiomatic, it is not literally the same.
Mm-hmm.
But you will say, okay, I'm not getting an answer to my question, right? So
Mm.
these things still do those things, they'll
Yeah.
get stuck. And yeah. So your question was, how can they be used? I pointed out the assistant part, saying that is low hanging fruit.
Low hanging fruit. That's right.
So, which means that if you are thinking of, say, drafting, suppose you are drafting public announcements,
Mm-hmm.
okay, just want to announce the next hearing on this topic will be at this time. Suppose,
Mm.
you are with the local,
Yeah.
some a legislative body or something, you have to schedule a public hearing.
Mm.
You, you tell Chat GPT, can you draft up an announcement, and then look at the announcement, quickly correct. You see that this is much faster than your typing or your, and the key is you are giving just some natural language instructions. You're not having to come up
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
those kinds of tasks, okay,
Mm.
are already being automated.
That's right.
They're already being automated. I met someone in Delhi who told me that his company went down from 9 people to 3 people because of automation.
Mm-hmm.
So automation is here, okay? And
Sure.
these things are helping that automation. So to some extent, I think it is fair to say that they are already making their presence felt.
That's
So
right.
what I'm saying is one need not wait until AGI
Mm-hmm.
to see that these things have made some kind of impact, right? So
Mm.
we don't have to wait until then, right?
That's
And
right.
long ago, I saw a very interesting quote in some book I read by a man named Ralston on numerical computing. He
Mm-hmm.
said that, you know, there's a question of, can computer think the way humans do? This was a question people were consumed with 40 or 50 years ago also.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What he pointed out was that you will have to come up with increasingly narrow definitions of
Mm.
what think means
Mm.
to come up with something you can say computers can't do that humans can do, right? So you used to be able to say that humans can play Go, they can play chess, but then you figured out a way to get these things to do it, right? There is one philosophical point I want to make very quickly though,
Mm-hmm.
which is that you see, an expert Go player becoming an expert at Go is a very different process
Yes.
from uh, uh, these things learning how to play Go. The two can't be compared, right? And again, I'll go back to the musical analogy. So in music, improvisation is learned. It is not exactly taught, right? It's not like
That's
you are
right.
told. It's not like you are told that, look, if you do these three things, improvisation will happen.
Mm-hmm.
No. But what do we do as musicians? We are exposed and
Mm.
we are asked to try little things by our teacher, and suddenly something clicks and we are able to improvise. So, what I'm saying is that a human being learning music for 20 years is going through a qualitatively very different experience from whatever these things are doing. So I don't want to conflate the two. We should be very clear. So what
Mm.
I'm saying is, even in the future, even if you have machines doing everything, the value of education continues. If you want to grow as an individual and lead a dignified life, it is my belief that you still have to go through the same effort and same rigors of
Yeah,
learning.
yeah.
I just wanted to make that point,
Ha-
in case.
yeah. So that's no, no. Thank you so much. That really gives a very interesting insights into this whole technology question also. But is it so we so when we classify them as emergent technologies, we are putting them at a certain stage of human civilization. They're emergent, but we don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, I suppose, uh, again, as a layperson, I might be dead. It might happen 100 years, 50 years down the line. Who knows where this will go? But as of now, what you have just described, I think it makes a lot of sense. You saying it as it is, as we stand today. But since you brought up that music example, and I know you're a trained classical vocalist, you're learning, and so am I. But I'm not a vocalist. I'm an instrumentalist, and you exactly. And I often think when I'm with reference to our classical South Asian music, I call Indian classical or South Asian music because we have the same rich
Sure, sure, sure.
history and heritage. I intuitively feel that where the technology is right now, I don't think it can cover that, as you mentioned, that when we are improvising, we're not really taught, but we are given some guidelines, some first principles, kind of a framework, and then we l- improvise with the tools we have and with the craft we have and with our emotions and feelings. So, my question, or just putting a thought out there and wondering what your thought is, that I don't think this is the AGI has reached that level, because I've heard that it was successful in completing Beethoven's one of his symphonies, which was unfinished. So Western music being a written music, again, probably they have larger data sets with Western music. So what is your take on what I just mentioned with reference to our
Right.
classical music?
So I would say this actually. I would say this. You have to be very careful. You can always give the impression of
Mhm.
improvising, right? I mean, that is how my initial performances were. I mean, my teacher told me, this is what you need to do. The audience doesn't know whether I improvised it or whether I'm totally following a script. Uh, I mean, a more savvy audience would,
Yes, yes.
but your typical audience may not
Yeah.
even figure out that's what's happening. Um, so I go back to the other thing I was pointing out to you, which is that there is a qualitative difference between giving the impression that you are improvising and the way you or I might improvise. You or I are improvising from the inside, as it were. We have somehow, uh, you know, somehow the essence of the raga is part of us now,
That's
and,
true.
and that is coming out, right? But the point is that I think even with current technology, if you ask it to imitate, so you basically say, listen to Ravi Shankar improvising on, some, say, Rag Bhageshri or something, keep listening. The technology is there to kind of produce something that sounds like improvisation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether it has the same kind of soul, whether it has the same kind of build up to it, you know,
Mm.
you folks in your sitario, all this alap, jod, jhala, the good ones actually tie the three things together. They are not really three unrelated performances. You actually bring it to the point where you feel I am now ready for a faster tempo
Mm.
treatment
Mm.
of this, and then you say, okay, now whatever I showed you, I am going to take it to the next level like this. So that kind of intentionality and artistic expression
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it is not qualitatively the same thing as something that just goes on memorizing and then, says that, okay,
Hmm.
here I'll play like Beena and here I'll play like Ravi Shankar. I
Okay.
come up with what you call a pastiche, right? I come
Hmm.
up with some kind of cocktail.
Hmm.
I think that kind of thing can be done even now. I don't think it's
Mm-hmm. Uh,
impossible.
okay.
But the key is if you are asking, is it the same as, Bina improvising on Rag Bihag? I would just humbly say, no, it is not.
Hmm.
It is not the same. So just because something is performatively equivalent
Hmm.
does
Hmm.
not make it the same experience. That's what I want to say again and
Okay,
again.
that's very interesting. I think you put it very well. That's not the same experience, and so yeah, that becomes very complex. Hopefully, Ajay, we would get more opportunities as and when it's convenient for you to talk about these things. But this has been really super to converse with you. It's been a great opportunity. Being in the same time zones, it has been easier. But thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this, and I hope when I'm able to edit this and put it, it's all ready to be put out there. Um, I hope those interested will be able to engage with the conversation as well. So thank you again, and thank you for your time, and hope to
No,
see you again.
no, no, thank you actually very much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, specifically and in general, to talk to people who engage you in an active way to bring the best out in you. So I should
Oh, thank you so much. But I think it works both ways. So the credit goes to you also. But thank you so much for that very generous comment. So I'll let you be. It's a Friday, and I'm sure you're gonna be getting back to work. So thank you, Jay.
thank you very much.